Welcome back. In this video we're going to add foliage to our aspen trees, and I'm using like a number 4 flat gold Taklon brush and paint that I've mixed to a creamy consistency. And we're going to use a variety of colors. We're going to start with some soft yellow greens to just tap in some background foliage, because when trees start turning fall colors they don't necessarily change all at once. You'll see some green colors peeking through. Then we'll start adding some oranges and yellows and reds. And this is kind of a personal decision on what color you want your trees to be. You can, if you want more reds, just focus more on the red colors. If you prefer them to be more yellow, you can do more yellow or orange colors. So I've got, just still the basic colors on my palette, and a cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, cadmium red, cyan blue, and a green. And these were the colors that we did the background with, and we're going to use them to add our foliage. I'm just sort of testing some colors right here. I'm adding some soft oranges right now. I've added some soft yellow greens, you can see. So it's sort of an experimentation, deciding what colors you like on your trees. But you want to keep this foliage sort of soft and airy so that some of the background peeks through. And you want this paint to be mixed with some water so it just really drops off your brush very easily in little spots. So I'm going to work on the ground a little bit now, and I've decided I wanted it to appear that the sun's shining through the trees a little bit left of center. So they're going to cause some shadows to be cast by these tree trunks. So I'm going to start tapping in a deeper blue-green color, and I'll angle these colors out from my tree trunks a little bit so that it appears there's shadows being cast from the sun shining through these trees. So again, it's the same way I'm doing the foliage on the tree branches. We're going to do this on the ground, just tapping in a variety of colors. You'll see I'm working down at an angle from the bottom of the tree trunk down towards the right bottom of the canvas as I start laying these shadows in. And I'm using a mix of green plus some blue and maybe a little bit of white. And as we put the shadows in, it's not going to be too obvious, but once we start putting the light colors in between, you'll see how these look like cast shadows from the sun shining through the trees. You're just going to keep working through this. Try to keep all your shadows kind of angling in a similar direction. And don't forget the shadows from your little background trees. They'll just be skinny little lines coming down. So now I'm going to mix some yellow into the green, and we'll start adding in some of the highlights. And these are going to go between your shadow lines. Just again, following in the same diagonal direction. This will be the areas of sunlight shining between the tree trunks. You'll see here, I had put horizon line in when we first did the background, but I've decided I want to move that up a little farther into the trees, so I'm just dabbing this ground cover back above that horizon line to give us some more ground substance back there. So just continue on across the canvas bottom, filling in this ground, the highlights and shadows. Here I've almost finished, so you can kind of see the effect of the lights and darks. And you can reinforce these as you go along with additional layers. But we just want to get something filled in to begin with. I'm back and adding a little stronger highlights in some of these areas. Just so the sunshine's a little more prominent. Over here in this area, I feel like this is still not quite bright enough, so I'm going to lighten that a little bit more. Now we're going to go back and work some more on our tree foliage. So I'm going to, again, start adding some of these yellow greens in. And again, you want this paint to be very creamy so it comes off your brush very easily. So I've mixed some water in it to make it like a heavy cream. And you're just going to tap in foliage where our little branches are coming out. Do some in here behind the trees so it kind of fills in this background. I think the hardest thing is trying to decide how much or how little to do of the foliage. I know I sometimes get a little too heavy-handed and then later I have to go back and correct. Here I've filled in more and more of the green foliage. So even at this point, if you wanted more of a spring or summer scene, you could just add some highlights at this point instead of going to the fall colors. I'm going to break up some of this orange background a little bit, so just adding some green in there. Now we'll move on and start adding some red foliage, and I'm just using the cadmium red. If you wanted a darker value, you could add a touch of the blue to it to make kind of a red violet, which would be a good shadow color for the foliage. You want to kind of dab this on in little like sprays of foliage. There's some space between them, but still clustered together, so it looks like they're leaves on a branch. Every once in a while, step back and hold your canvas away from you. You'll get a better overall view of it if you're looking at it from a little distance. I'm going to add some yellow orange by mixing some yellow, the cadmium yellow, into the cadmium orange, and this would be a kind of a highlight color for the reds. Just don't add so many clusters of spots that you lose the definition. You want to see some shading and highlighting. And a little background showing through. If you feel like it's not quite light enough, you can add a little bit of white into the mix. I'm going to add some stronger highlights of yellow plus a little white, and you can see my brush is still dirty with the orange, so there's a touch of that orange in there too. But we just want a lighter value to add stronger highlights that will separate it from the background. I'm putting out some fresh yellow. I'm going to experiment with here with adding some more yellow leaves. Like I've gotten a little muddy here in this center area, so I'm going to try adding some yellow in here. You'll find you just work back and forth with the colors a lot. And later, I'll show you how to correct. If you get a little too heavy in some places, I'll show you a way to correct that by putting some sky back in some of these areas. Once you get an area of foliage in and you want to highlight it, you just need to mix a lighter value. So I'm adding some white to the yellow. I'm going to add some light yellow highlights in some of these yellow areas of foliage I've added. This is just a back and forth, trying to decide when's a good time to stop. streak a little bit more of the white and yellow here in these highlight areas on the ground, just to brighten them up a little more, look like sun rays shining through. Still just using the little flat brush, just very lightly streaking. You can adjust this negative space here behind these trees a little bit as you go too. Some of it might need to be a little lighter, some you can darken a little. So here you can see areas of highlight, our shadows on the ground. Everything's looking pretty good right now. I'm just mixing a little red-orange color with some water. And I'm going to go back and reinforce some of my orange reds in the foliage. Again, you know, which colors you use and which you emphasize is up to you. Okay, I mentioned we can go back, and if the foliage gets too heavy or you want more sky showing, we can correct this. And what I'm doing is taking our cyan blue and some white, and just mixing a sky color, adding some water. It's kind of like we're doing foliage again, but in blue. And I'm going to go back and dab in this blue sky color in through the foliage, where I want it to appear that there's more sky peeking through. So if you get areas that your foliage got too heavy, or you just want your sky to come down a little further, you know, this is a way to get that sky color back in among the trees. When I did the original background, I didn't bring the sky color down too much, and after getting the painting finished, I decided it would really be nice to see some of that sky blue showing through. So this is the opportunity to do that. And I think in some of these areas, I feel like, you know, especially down in the center, some of my foliage got a little too clumpy, a little too dense. And I'll be adding some of that sky back down into there to, you know, break it up a little bit. So I've got more sky color added down here into the foliage, and I think this looks better. I may adjust it more later once I get closer to being finished. You can see how it just brings our sky down into the trees a little more. I'm going to drag a little bit of this blue sky color into the ground foliage a little bit. Just a reflection in the greens down there. It's good to repeat your colors throughout your design. Another thing I decided I should do is, since the sun's coming from behind the trees, it'd be good to have these trees shaded, the front of the tree shaded a little bit. So I'm going to mix up a blue-gray with some black plus our sky color. Just a touch of black, you don't want very much. And going to do a wash down the center of these tree trunks, the large ones in front. You won't be doing all the little teeny ones back there. But since the sun's coming from behind, there should be a kind of a shadow at the front of the tree. You can do it all down the center or a little right of center. they should just be shaded a little more. If you were starting this from scratch, you could do this stage at this shadow when you first do your tree trunks, not before you've done your foliage, but sometimes I don't always do things in a logical manner when I'm creating a painting. I see something as I go along that I think needs to be fixed, so I'm going back and fixing that now. This is just a wash. You don't want it to cover your shadows, your dark lines on the tree very much. We just don't want that real sharp highlight on the front of the tree since the light's from behind. I want to darken some of the negative space between the trees near the ground line, so I'm going to mix up just a dirty brownish color, green plus the red, and some water, and start dabbing that in between these tree trunks where I just want to darken that a little bit so it looks like the ground goes up a little further. So this is just kind of a dull greenish brown color. I'm going to add a few more highlights in the foliage, so I'm mixing up kind of a dirty yellow. And my brush had a little bit of green and red in it, and I'm adding some more yellow and white. Some water again so that it's very creamy, and I'm going to just dab a few more highlights in areas that I see need stronger highlights. At this stage we're just playing and adjusting. I'm mixing up again some of that green and red and going back and darkening some more of these negative spaces between the tree trunks. So a lot of, these things will just depend on your painting, where you're at, and whether you think something needs to be adjusted. I'm going to darken some of the ground cover a little bit more. added a little bit of the oranges and reds into it. So I've just kind of mixed up some blue and red and add a little bit of orange to give it a brownish touch. So I'm kind of touching these foliage colors into the shadows. I'm going to add a little bit of blue, just to throw a few more little shadows. I think some of these areas need to be broken up a little bit with little fine shadows from these background trees. This will add a little more interest to this foreground. Do green plus a little blue. Again, darkening some of this negative space, just little adjustments. You need to go a little darker, just add a touch of black. Again, it's just hard to stop, so I'm going to try to dab in some more reds into the foliage. I'm going to just add some real little fly speck highlights, so I'm mixing up some dirty white with water on like a 3/4 inch flat brush, and then I'm going to tap it against the handle of another brush, and that will cause little splatters to go on the canvas. I'm trying to just direct these into the foliage just to add little twinkly highlights. Here's the finished canvas, and as I looked at it, I decided I still had some heavy foliage in the center, so I put in some additional sky and did some fine line work detail on the limbs to come up with the final painting here. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and we'll come back for another one.